Friday edition, Mr. Irrelevant Alex Strouf from the Everlight Solar Studio in downtown Madison. It is a Colin Russo Friday, although he is not with me in the Everlight Solar Studio because I believe he is going to or is in Lake Geneva. Collie, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Madison, so I'm not there yet. Going for the weekend. I leave in like 2 hours, 2 or so hours, so I'm in good shape.
So we discussed what is the right term here? We discussed the idea of a date party in the past. Is going to Lake Geneva a date party as well?
No, that's a day party.
But it's an overnight one.
It is.
So you are bachelor styling like the Bachelor Bachelorette TV show on ABC overnight date? Is that how we should view this? Or is it more of, hey, it's just
That's
a
probably
big
the right form.
Or is this more like, hey, it's a big group of friends just getting together?
Depends on how you. That's up to the person to handle it the way they want to. Let me tell you one thing too. So we're taking a bus down there, right?
Yeah.
I was proclaimed bus leader. Bad news for everybody else.
What does that mean?
I'm just like, I coordinate with the bus driver. Whatever. It's just like, a bunch of logistical stuff. So knowing me, I get a little creative. Okay, how can we make this bus fun? I had 3 ideas. Idea number 1, I don't tell anybody, and we stop somewhere like egregious, and we stop for an hour, whether for food or whatever the hell. I was thinking Long John Silver's. There's one connected to a KFC.
Yeah.
Like south of Janesville. I thought that was.
I was actually going to pitch Janesville as the idea.
So I moved on from that because I didn't want to piss everybody off before we even got the weekend started. So I pitched that out. That was out. Second idea was, again, to not let anybody know that we were stopping anywhere and to stop at a bar. And I was like, that would be fun. I think people would be pleasantly surprised with that.
Sure.
But ultimately, I didn't trust everybody to, I don't know, be on time, the logistical stuff like that. So instead, idea number 3 is base this off of number 2. I found a random bar. It was in God knows middle of nowhere. It's called Wet Bottoms Barbecue and Grill and Bar.
Wow. Yeah.
35 minutes south. It's about the halfway point. It is a big indoor. You know where the world's largest Culver's is?
I do, yes.
You know how that's like on a river?
Yeah.
So it's right across the river and it's right there. That's where that bar is. So I found this place. I called him yesterday. I said, hey, the bus, I think, is like 50-something people. We got a bus, and it's all the seniors. So we got a bus of like 50-something people coming, and didn't want to overwhelm you guys. Is it possible we could get in? We'll be in and out in 2 hours tops. Drinks, food, the whole bit. Have a good time. We'll be in and out. We have a bus parked in the parking lot. Do our thing. And she's like, yeah. I talked to the manager. She's like, yeah, I'll get another bartender in. I'll set up some tables for you guys. It was a good job, Colin Russo. And so I set up a whole thing here. Better yet, too, 3 to 6 on Fridays is happy hour. So you're going to get the bet, and we're going to be there at 3:15. You're going to get the best of both worlds here. So I let everybody know. I said, this place is expecting us tomorrow. Ultimately, if it goes well, because we're a little time constricted, so you're only going to be there for about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But you make best use of your time. I think this is going to be a very successful venture into God knows where, Wisconsin. I don't know what the town is called, but it was between that, which is like a big established bar.
Yep.
Or a place called Hat Tap Rack. Do you know where Avalon, Wisconsin is?
I do not know where Avalon, Wisconsin is.
So I found it. It's about 25 minutes east of Janesville. And it is labeled on Google Maps as an unincorporated community.
Nice.
And I counted, there's probably 14 buildings in this community.
Oh, wow.
Including a bar called Hat Tap Rack. I Google Earthed it, and it's on a dirt road. And they only have a Facebook page, which is a telltale sign that this is as divey as it gets.
It's a dive bar, yep.
And so I was like, this is the place we got to go to, right? And I sent it to a bunch of people. I'm like, what do we think? Everybody was like, I don't think this place is big enough. And
that
2,
was going to be my concern, yeah.
This place looks like a complete dump. So I got superseded a little bit in that regard. But I think I got a good backup plan with Wet Bottoms Bar and Barbecue.
Wet Bottoms Bar and Barbecue.
Mm-hmm. Pretty good.
Are
Right?
you a good planner by trade? Like is or by trade? Is
I'm a
that
huge planner. Yeah, I
are
love
you?
planning. I
Okay.
like that. It's fun because maybe it's a control thing. I have
Could
no
be.
idea.
Could be.
And maybe it's just me just wanting to have like my hands all over the plans.
Yeah.
And that probably is a lot of it. But other than that, it's still fun. It's easy. It's better to have a plan. I'm willing to do the work to make sure it works. And then here we are.
All right, I dig it. So you are looking forward to your weekend in Lake Geneva. Have you ever been?
No,
I
have
have
you?
not. I have not either. No.
It's like a Chicago vacation spot from what I've heard.
Yeah, a lot of Illinois people go there. That's where Lucas Van Ness was when he was drafted by the Packers last year.
Really, like a house or something like
Yeah,
that.
like a
Okay.
rental in Lake Geneva, if I'm not
It's
mistaken.
out of
Yeah,
season too, but the weather's supposed to be It's supposed to be 70 and sunny tomorrow.
yeah, it's gonna be
So I'm not
gorgeous this
worried
week.
about like we'll be outside all day having a good time. So I'm not worried about it.
Fair enough. All right, want to get your reaction to this, Colin. Montez Sweat, the Bears defensive stud who signed a contract extension during the season last year, was on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long, had this to say about the Green Bay Packers. Want to get your reaction on Montez Sweat.
And Jordan Love changed the whole
I'm letting you
landscape.
know right now, man. I'm not losing to Green Bay this year. I can't do it. I can't do it, man. I'm not losing to Green Bay this year, man. We done created a real rivalry over there.
So that sounds like a man who's completely defeated, does Montez Sweat, as he says he can't do it. He can't lose to Green Bay this year.
I agree with that. That's number one. Number two, the key word there was we created a little rivalry there. Where is said rivalry?
Correct.
Where is this rivalry? You guys got to win a couple games before we could establish this. Historically, it's a rivalry, of course, but the last 8-10 years, absolutely not. So let's calm down for a guy who's played 7 games in Chicago and has barely went through the reins in that city to quickly declare Chicago Bears as Super Bowl champions and all that garbage. So I time out on that part.
Yeah.
It's defeated. Yeah, like it sounds like it makes it seem like the Green Bay's inevitable, which is kind of what they are.
Yeah. Against Chicago, they
collapse,
certainly have been.
to crash and burn, but they never seemingly do. And whether it's like not getting over the top hump or reaching the peak, that's one thing. But they're always in the mix, and that's what the Packers have been great at for 20 years. So I think that's probably part of it. Is like the Bears have stunk for God knows how long, and the Packers have always been good. But that is the way he phrased that. It was kind of like complaining. Like
Yeah, he just sounded miserable, and it's April, right? Like we're
whining. Whining's probably the right word.
We're 3 months into the off season. I mean,
Whining.
dude, you should be in the Bahamas and enjoying yourself, and you're reflecting on losing to Green Bay in the final week of the season because he wasn't on the team in week 1 when Jordan Love had his coming out party. The other part of that is, too, as you mentioned, the Packers kind of inevitable against Chicago. Matt LaFleur is 10-0. He has yet to lose to the Bears as the head coach of the Packers. There's much more of a rivalry between Detroit and Green Bay, but I love hearing every offseason, it seems, a Bears player bitches and moans. Something about the Packers. I remember like a no-name defensive lineman last year said something.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is no longer in the NFC North. I remember going into that Week 18 matchup, said all we care about is football in Green Bay, which is partially true. But it is just rather obnoxious to me that continues to be such a talking point in April, right? Like, shouldn't he be talking about how excited he is to have Caleb Williams in town?
Unbelievable. And I don't know what he's doing a podcast in April anyway. But he's doing it in the off season. Whatever, man. Like whatever. It's Chris Long, so I understand. Like there's probably some sort of connection there, and you got to give him something. But it's always the NFC North talking about Green Bay than Green Bay talking about the NFC North.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. NFL draft coming up. I mentioned it. Caleb Williams will go number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears. What other players pop out to you, good or bad, right? Like J.J. McCarthy jetting up the charts is still bananas to me. I just don't think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback.
Yeah, that's the obvious one, J.J. McCarthy. This happens every year. When there's a 3-month hiatus from from actual games to the draft, that's all media can do is really just drive up narratives and, overhype pro days and, overthink the combine, and guys don't do anything at the combine anymore because of these narratives carrying the draft stock. So that's just what happens every year. And if the draft happened 3 weeks after the college football playoff, JJ McCarthy would be a fringe first rounder.
Correct.
And just because there's been time to sit and marinate and try to create a story, teams buy into it. They try to sell themselves on it. What happens every year. But other guys that pop out, in terms of a negative side, I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be as good as everybody is claiming for him to be.
I'm high on him.
Are you? Like, he's got a big arm and he's experienced, but I mean, people worried about it with Bryce Young. I understand with the size, but the size makes a difference especially when you go to a bad team. He's not a big guy, and he wasn't as elusive and protected as Bryce Young was at Alabama. He kind of throws himself into the fire. That's dangerous, and that's going to be something you're going to have to adjust to pretty freaking fast, because Kyler was also just great, like evasive. Movement. He protected himself to a degree. It took Lamar a year or two to figure it out. It took Hurts a year or two to figure it out. But Anthony Richardson who was a behemoth of a human being, thought he could power his way through NFL defenders, and he was out for the year by like week 6. So these guys who throw themselves into the arms of these professional 275-pound, 5% body fat NFL defensive linebackers, I think that worries me a little bit, especially when you go to a bad team who's not established, probably a bad offensive line. But other guys that I like, the corners are a little bit lower end. The receivers is what everybody goes to as well. And for receivers, I think Brian Thomas, a mid-first rounder, that guy picked up football like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's like a 4.39 player. He led the league in touchdowns for an offense where Neighbors was the number 1. That is a guy, in my opinion, if he goes to the right scheme and system where he doesn't have to be the number 1 immediately, I think he could be a very dangerous player. You know what's another one too? Joe Alt, the lineman from Notre Dame.
He's getting a lot of pub right now. Yeah.
2 false starts and 1 hold in his last 3 years. And that's incredible. So he's technically proficient and he doesn't give up sacks. So in terms of you want a franchise guy, circle his name and go.
If the Packers were going to move into the top 10, which I think is incredibly unlikely, but if they were going to, that would be the guy I hope they go get, because it seems like he's going to be a bona fide all-pro, maybe even year 1, Joe Alt. And it seems like with all the quarterback needs in the league, a lot of quarterbacks will go high, and he could fall out of the top 5, which is shocking to me, because I think.
And what happened this year with quarterbacks? All the quarterbacks went down. Everybody got hurt.
Yeah, everybody got hurt.
So if general managers were to think reflectively a little bit, what do we have to change? Pass rushers are getting so much better. Linebackers are getting faster, and defensive tackles are becoming better at sacking the quarterback. So everybody is getting better at getting after your quarterback. What do you have to adjust with? You got to get running backs who know how to block, and you got to get linemen who are better than what you got, because clearly something's not working. If there 50 different starters in the league this past year.
Yeah,
so
over that, I think.
Something's got to change, and I think GMs are going to think reflectively of that and think highly of beefing up that offensive line.
Beefing up, indeed. I saw 13 people accepted a green room invite, and I was debating, Colin, on my drive into work. This is where my mind was, so you can make fun of me for that. If I was good enough to be invited to the green room, but not like a bona fide top 5 pick, would I accept the invite? And I don't know that I would. And I was surprised to see only 13 people accepted the invite this year. That seemed low to me, but I might be wrong on that. 13 seems like a low number. I don't know that I'd accept a green room invite, though, because I don't want the Aaron Rodgers situation where you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, or the Johnny Manziel situation. Will Levis, absolutely, the second round. I would hate that. That would be so uncomfortable. All eyes on you. And as much as I like attention, not there. That's just uncomfortable.
I'm interested. Yeah, 13. They probably invited 25?
I would guess
30?
somewhere around there. Yeah, 25 or 30.
Huh.
Does it help? Is the case to be made that it's in Detroit and these guys don't want to go to Detroit, Michigan?
No, it's the NFL draft. You're gonna go. You got agents covering that. You're gonna meet your teams immediately. They're gonna fly you right from the draft. One thing I'll say too is, ever since that COVID draft, players have become more and more comfortable with just, being in their homes and surrounded by their families and having a party around it. Making it like a draft party, food, family, drinks, everybody has a good time, whatever. So that's probably one part of it. But that is also those are pictures, memories, and you hugging the commissioner.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would sell me. And you know what? If you didn't get drafted, if you fell in the first round, if I think people view that, like people view that for Levis, they're like, oh, he's going to be motivated from here. They're not embarrassed for him. They're not like, they don't pity him. They're like, oh, this is going to light a fire under this guy. And if anything, that is the proper motivation you need to go to play him with a chip on your shoulder.
But
going
hold
into
on.
rookie.
You don't view that and you're like, oh, that's embarrassing. Because that's my view on it.
Really?
I mean, yeah, I understand the chip on the shoulder debate and the theory behind it because I think that's accurate. But that's so uncomfortable. You're just like slouched in your chair and wait. Like there's that scene in the movie Draft Day, which, by the way, underrated movie. People crap on that movie all the time. I think Draft Day is a phenomenal watch.
It's just not very. He fleeces the Jaguars in it, which I do not like. But that's a good movie. But like the way I look at it is like, yeah, it is pretty like. You're sitting there, your suit, you can't eat anything.
Yeah.
You get people waiting there, just like you don't know what the hell is coming. You don't know if a call is coming from your agent or whoever, God knows what. So that I agree. I guess it depends on where you're being mocked. Because if you're a player, you're probably scouting that nonstop, right?
I would guess so. Because I imagine it's hard to ignore if your name is being brought up all the time.
First rounder like Rome Odunze,
yeah.
the wide receiver for Washington, who's being projected from 7 to 15. Is he looking at all these mock drafts, seeing what these guys think?
If I was Rome Odunze, yes. My answer is yes. But I don't know that that's true. Because I want to know where the hell my destiny is, right? And that's the weird part about the WNBA draft happening next week, the NBA or the NFL draft happening in 2 weeks. You just have no control over your own fate unless you're Eli Manning. And
which will never happen again.
No, I don't think it will. And I hated that during the offseason. They were trying to stir up the Caleb Williams to try to be Eli Manning storylines. No, but he's going to a 7-win team. I imagine this is probably one of the better situations of all time the number 1 overall draft pick is going to. And I hate to say that about the Bears, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and I was on with Jim Rutledge for Rutledge and Hamilton. You could hear that.
Sorry to hear that.
2-4. 4-6, excuse me. On Wisconsin On Demand and ESPN Madison. But one thing that we were talking about last week is think about the last few years. There hasn't been a better number 1 overall pick destination. Think about it. Joe Burrow on the Bengals. Joe Burrow got destroyed his rookie year.
He got killed.
Bryce Young probably had the worst of the bunch. That was a complete disaster. Trevor Lawrence had a complete disaster when he walked into. Trayvon Walker had a good year because they had Trevor Lawrence. That's a little different. But you go down the list of these players, other than like really Andrew Luck and maybe a couple others here and there, there's not a lot of number 1 overall picks. You're not walking into a carnival. You're walking into a burned down medieval town, and you got to figure out how to navigate and how to build this place back up. That's a strange connection.
That was an interesting analogy. I like it,
right.
though.
But you're not walking in. It's not going to be sunshine and rainbows the second you walk in here. This place has internal issues, external issues, probably bad fans, and a locker room disconnect. That's not an easy thing to walk into. But the Bears, there's promise. They got a pretty good front office. They seem to like their head coach. They got a new offensive coordinator in there. They definitely got talent. They're definitely trying to build around him. I'm sure he's had the playbook for a month.
Probably.
So I'm sure he's ahead of the game. He can't complain. And you're in Chicago. You're in a top 4 city in the United States. Maybe not top 4 football city, but generally a top 5 at least. Metro area to live in, and it's a famous city, and it's where Michael Jordan played and everything like that. Patrick Kane, the Blackhawks. You go down the list. The Cubs, historic.
The hell does Michael Jordan have to do with Caleb Williams?
But it's Chicago.
It's a good sports city, is your point.
If he was going to, I don't know, if he was going to Houston or these up in the air, Indianapolis, that's a little different. But you're going to Chicago. So the fact that there was even discussions about him not really wanting to be there and deciding his own destiny, I think you're going to see that a lot next year with Shedeur Sanders. But
you will.
Yeah.
The new Lonzo Ball, without a doubt.
Who's going to try to forge his destination.
At least Dion is at least you can take him, right? Like, at least you can listen to him, unlike LeVar Ball, but there are so many similarities there, it's uncanny.
So many. It's just Dion has a background. LeVar did
Correct.
not have the background.
Correct.
Dion has the credentials. But I can't get over these players. You're gonna walk in, you're gonna sign your contract, you're gonna have $30 million in the bank before you could blink with a signing bonus, and you're gonna be making plenty of money. You're gonna have the keys to the city, and you're gonna have a whole offseason where everybody's catering to you. I don't understand where the complaint lies. So I don't know. I think he's gonna be great for them. I really do.
No, I do too. I think it's a great scenario. Now, Chicago traditionally kills quarterbacks, and I hope that's the case again as a Packers fan. But I'm intrigued to see how it goes because that's a 7-win team from a year ago. I think the NFC North is going to be stacked.
Yeah, it will be great. I guess Detroit got a lot better.
Detroit got better. Green Bay, in my opinion, got better, and they still have some more getting better to do in a couple weeks in the NFL draft. They've got some needs to address, but for a team that won on the road against Dallas and smoked them in the playoffs, who was viewed as one of the better teams in the NFC, to have San Francisco on the ropes in the divisional round, Jordan Love obviously proved himself as the franchise quarterback. Now this year is about making sure you prove that's not a fluke, but I love where the Packers are at. The Bears could go from 7 to 10 wins, I don't think, without much of an issue. I think they upgraded in the offseason. Minnesota's the wild card. I think they're probably the worst team in the division. Do you believe in the Sam Darnold rebirth, I guess is the question, and I don't. I am not a believer in the Sam Darnold rebirth.
He was somebody, like, we had a discussion a couple weeks ago about who is that guy that you thought was going to be a surefire hit that ended up fizzling out. Sam Darnold was on my list because I remember him at USC. He was so good and crafty and kind of just like the stereotypical quarterback you want to see. And he goes into the Jets, disaster. I mean, he didn't get any opportunities elsewhere, whatever. So he hasn't really hadn't put anything together and stacked anything. So I don't believe in that. And I think that's going to rely on what quarterback they get in the draft, whether it's Penix or Bo Nix or moving up to get McCarthy, whatever the hell, because they're definitely going to do it.
They're going to draft a quarterback, but I think they're going to go, maybe I shouldn't call it the Packers way, but sit him a year.
Yeah. Depends who they get. I mean, if they sit Penix, is it worth to sit him a year?
Probably not.
Right. They get McCarthy, I agree. They get Penix or something like that, I don't think so.
Yeah, Bo Nix, would you sit Bo Nix for a year? I would.
Probably.
But he's old, right? Like that's the other part.
Yeah, he's going to be 26 when he starts.
That's insane.
Yeah.
How many years was he in college? 7?
Huh? He started as a true freshman at Auburn.
Right.
I remember his first game was against Oregon. He had a great game. So he played 4 years at Auburn and 2 years at
I believe Oregon? So. I think so.
Wow. So yeah, he's got his fair share of experience. Let me ask you this. Of the first round quarterback needy teams, I should say, Washington, New England, I'll throw the Giants in there.
Okay.
Las Vegas, Minnesota. Maybe I'm forgetting one or two. Which one do you think is the, excluding the Bears, which one do you think is the best spot for a first-year quarterback to walk into and start immediately?
Oh, boy. You probably missed Denver in there, would be my guess.
Denver. Let's include Denver.
Yeah.
So Denver, Minnesota, Las Vegas, New York Giants, Washington, and New England.
What is the best situation? I have no idea. Maybe Las Vegas. Probably the Raiders would be my guess. Maybe Denver. But that's such a tough division. And I think Harbaugh is going to fix the Chargers, and obviously the Chiefs are the Super Bowl champions until anybody can prove to me otherwise.
You want to stay away from the NFC East?
Yeah, I don't want to go to Washington. I have no idea what to think of Gerard Mayo as a head coach. I like the guy, but I don't know if he has the like the Houston-esque turnaround in him. So I don't know that I'm subscribing to Gerard Mayo in New England yet. And he's a defensive coach anyway. I have no idea. None of them are very good, right? And that's what makes Caleb. I would
probably say Minnesota.
Williams.
I'd probably say Minnesota.
Yeah,
because of the offensive talent.
But I guess the reason I'm not saying them is because I don't think they're looking for a starter in year one. I truly believe they're going to roll with Darnold.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they get Penix. And I just
think a big deal for them is pleasing Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously with Jordan Addison in town as well, and you add Aaron Jones in the offseason. Like that's TJ Hawkinson, right? Like at the skill positions offensively, you're in a really good shape in Minnesota, and that's why I think they'll probably go the route of starting a guy who started an NFL game before despite not being all that great in Sam Darnold. But
yeah,
it'd be better, likely better, at least from an offensive standpoint, of a situation than Chicago, which Caleb Williams is stepping into. But he's got some really good pieces around him as well. So yeah, you're right. I would say Minnesota's probably the best scenario. But I just don't view a rookie quarterback going in there and starting day one. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's the way I'm viewing it right now.
Huh. Interesting. Denver is not a bad one either.
No, but do you trust Sean Payton? You probably should because of his background, but
comparatively, Dable's had a success, but that's a disaster with what's going on with Daniel Jones and a tough market to play in.
It's a disaster.
Pierce, a first-year head coach, truly. Eber, I won't count them. And then you got the Gerard Mayo. So in terms of coaches that actually have dealt with something like this before, I think you're most confident in what Sean Payton can do, because you don't know if Russell Wilson just is completely lost all steam in the engine. You don't know that. Maybe he has. So that's one thing. But and also I don't think there's a ton of pressure to win immediately there.
Yeah.
Because they all know it's kind of like Mahomes' inevitability. And I don't think there's as much pressure to win as there is probably in other spots.
It's a fair point. What pick do the Jags have? You're a Jags fan.
17.
17. What do you want them to do?
So there's three major positions of need that they're probably going to go after. They need a wide receiver because they let Calvin Ridley walk.
Yep.
And they need a cornerback because of what the hell Houston's got going on. Just to combat that, you need another corner.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things I could see them doing. Number one is I could see them using assets and making a trade up to get a top 3 or 4 receiver. Do not be surprised if they do that. Into like the top 10
inside sources or what? Don't be surprised.
That's what I know they're looking for one. Another name that keeps popping up is Brandon Ayuk, who has been on the trade block for the San Francisco 49ers. Clearly doesn't want to be there, wants a long-term deal. That is a guy who, because of the Stephon Diggs trade, his value probably went up quite a bit.
It did.
That's where you got to be nervous about that. But I could see them making like a second rounder and a couple players or something like that for him.
What about T. Higgins?
I think he's too expensive, and I don't think they're going to deal with him.
Got it.
I don't think they're going to deal. I think the Niners would get rid of Ayuk. But there's that, and then there's also drafting, just staying at 17 and drafting like a Brian Thomas or Ad Mitchell from Texas is the one I keep seeing popping up. I'm more on the team of get a rookie receiver because there's so many good ones. This is like that 2020 draft where there's 100 guys that are great. So because of that, I would roll the dice with a rookie receiver. But they also need a corner, so I could see them going corner first round, and I could also see them going edge again and just getting more pass rushing help.
Do you get pretty deep into the NFL draft? I do, but I usually don't until about right now. Like this week is when I started my draft prep.
You have a different perspective than I do. I lived perennially in the top 10 until the last few years.
That's fair.
So because of that, I used to be really into it. I used to know all these guys. They would, because the second and third round picks, those are more like, that second round pick's more like a first round pick, and that third round pick's more like a second round pick. When you're top 4 in the draft, right? So I always got into that and let's stack these picks, let's whatever, because everything's more valuable when you're the top of the line of the draft. So nowadays, middle of the draft, you don't get as much into it because you just need so many chips to fall where they may before you even make a decision. So I have names in mind. I don't really have I need the draft to go this way in order for me to be happy because there's just too many moving pieces. There's going to be guys trading up, trading down. It's too much needs to go right in order for me to spend so much time to freak out about what the Jaguars should do. So if that makes sense. So, when they're earlier, you have an idea of I need the top 3 to look like this. I remember when Fournette was getting drafted, they were the 4th overall
Your guy.
Team. I needed them to do this. When Jalen Ramsey got drafted, he was the 5th overall pick. I needed them to do this. That all worked out. It's a little harder when you're at 17.
That's fair. Are the Packers Super Bowl good?
So I'm a little back and forth on this. Number one, I think there has been a little bit of a misconception and a runaway with this because the Packers had a good year last year. They won a playoff game. They're up to the wazoo in youth and
up to the wazoo, indeed.
In complete youth, and everybody's going to expect them to take the next step, right? That's the consensus around it, is that the receivers are going to take the next step and the quarterback's going to take the next step. The young defensive player is going to take the next step, whatever. This is a slippery slope, in my opinion. Maybe the Jaguars do not have as good of a developmental team as the Packers do, but the Jaguars, they won a playoff game in 2022, 2023. They played the Chiefs well in the divisional round. The Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl. And the Jaguars, what did they do in the offseason? They kind of sat on their hands, didn't make a ton of moves, made a couple here and there, but ultimately relied on a lot of the guys they already had to take huge leaps.
Definitely.
That ultimately didn't really happen, and the Jaguars kind of got burned because of it. Now, the Packers are handling this a little differently. They replaced the running back position. They got Xavier McKinney in there, so they've made some moves more so than the Jaguars did.
For sure.
But there's a lot of reliance on these guys needing to take a jump. And all I'll say is that is never guaranteed in the NFL.
No.
Because guys get scouted, injuries, scheduling, whatever.
Yeah.
And because of that, I don't know if I could declare them Super Bowl good, but they're playoff good. And if you're playoff good, then it's anybody's game.
Especially in the NFC. And San Francisco still seems like the favorite, but I think, Detroit, Green Bay, Dallas, Philadelphia.
Detroit's going to be really, really dangerous.
Yeah, they are. I'm intrigued to see how the NFC North shakes out. I think it'll be the best division in football, but we will see. All right, time now to wrap up the show. You learn something new every day. I learned something new this week that I want to run by Colin Russo, and that is that American Family Field in Milwaukee, gunning after WWE's Royal Rumble. They want to host a Royal Rumble.
Really?
Following winterizing their stadium, which they still need to do, but it probably wouldn't be until 26 or 27. But they want to host one of the WWE's premier events, which happens to be my favorite event. Colin, would you go to the Royal Rumble with me if it came to Milwaukee?
I would, because I agree, one of my favorite events as well. There's nothing better than John Cena coming back from injury in 2005.
Yeah, 2007, but yes.
The iconic comeback.
Oh, wait.
Or
Oh, wait.
when Edge came back in whatever, I think it was like 2010, when his iconic music comes on and the Rated R Superstar comes out for the first time in like 3 years. The Royal Rumble is just like all about the energy.
When's the last time you watched WWE?
Sat down and while it was live.
Like I watched it on Sunday. I watched WrestleMania.
I tuned into WrestleMania for a little bit. I watched the Women's Championship, and the acting didn't sell me as much as it used to. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
But I didn't watch the famous match, of course. So the last time I watched it was years ago. I don't know, when I was in middle school or something like that. But the Royal Rumble, I thought they did that they don't do that in football arenas. I guess only WrestleMania is a football.
Typically, yeah. They usually go baseball stadiums.
Baseball, basketball.
Yeah, for Rumble.
Huh. Interesting. I
think
didn't
they were in
because I'm
Tampa
curious
last year.
how they would formulate that. They'd probably add seats and whatever, but I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not a planner like Colin Russo is.
No.
Onward to your trip in Lake Geneva. Thanks for the time, buddy. We'll do it again next week.
All right, sounds good. See you soon.
We'll talk to you Monday. Eric Name from The Athletic will join us to break down the Bucs regular season beginning at 12:30 on the ESPN Milwaukee, ESPN Madison YouTube channels. If you missed any of the show, you can find it at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're back with you Monday. I'm Alex Strouf. This is Mr. Irrelevant. Peace.